In today's episode of the ImanWire podcast.
I know that everybody around in the Arab world and maybe the Muslim world is looking of how can we learn from this? How can we move? When I knew that this was happening, aside from my emotional state, Wallahi, I looked into a dear aunt of mine at that time and I said, Wallahi, this is one step closer to Gaza, bi'idhnillah. Wallahi, this is one step closer to our brothers and sisters in Egypt, to our brothers and sisters in Sudan. Bi'idhnillah ta'ala.
I've come to realize the more that someone attempts to pursue the love of the divine and the ma'rifah and the experiential knowledge of Allah and His Messenger, alayhi salatu wasalam, the more they're going to have izzah and honor and the beauty of Islam. The more that we make our religion an experiential reality in our lives, the more we're going to fall in love with everything that the Prophet ﷺ handed to us, and the more we start to realize its greatness, its superiority, and its difference from everything else. Okay, Bismillah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. First thing I just want to say as we're getting started is, like, Arfan, why is it every time we gather for a podcast, you always have technical difficulties? I'm just trying to understand.
So I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I pretend to be like every other brown person who's very attuned to technology. But in reality, I know no more about technology than my own dad. So that's the reality of it.
Actually, when did you get a flip phone? When did you move from a flip phone to an iPhone?
It was during the pandemic, so it was like 21 or 22. I think it was actually 22, 23. And they forced it on me. So then I had no choice. So it's like this iPhone, but it's like the worst iPhone you can imagine. Like, it's so tiny.
I don't know. You know, the ailments of having an iPhone. Like, first of all, everyone feels that they have the right to get a hold of you at any moment. And like, if you don't reply that exact second, it's as if you've committed some egregious sin. And it's a lot. Like, you know, I don't know if you guys are feeling it brings like so much pressure into your life.
Well, I'll give you an example. I think the Mutasma will love this example. As you know, I did not have an iPhone. So paying attention in the khutbah was never really an issue. But, you know, what happens sometimes is when you get curious and you have a phone at your disposal and the imam may say something, you know, like, is that right? Or like, what did he quote? Like, what verse? So I was in a khutbah recently and the imam said something and I just started looking it up on my phone during the khutbah. And I was like, I'm just going to just look it up, just put the search in, and I'm going to read it later. You know, I'm not going to do it now. Anyways, started, you know, like doom scrolling in the middle of Jummah. And somehow, some way, always ended back to my secret passion of prayer beads or sneakers or something. And I remember like an older gentleman next to me just like tapped my shoulder and he was like, just like shook his head. It's like, dang it. I just became another statistic.
Allah sent you someone to remind you as to what you shouldn't be doing. Fonzredo, you have an iPhone, right?
I do. It's been a while.
It's been a while.
I do miss my razor. I don't know if you remember the early
the razor.
I used to have a razor. I used to have the razor. Yeah, I used to have that.
Yeah, the razor is a very exciting phone at that time.
It was. I had a razor. So I would probably say my journey was around that time. I think I stopped. It was 2009. And I just felt like if I kept going, I would become someone that I would not want to be with myself. So I just decided not to be a part of social media, a part of like the phone culture, everyone looking down. But I don't know if you guys have seen this experience, but I was recently in a setting. Everyone's an adult. Like, we talk throughout the day. We all work together and we're all finally together. We don't see each other often. And people were so awkward that they were just looking down at their phones the whole time. It was weird, to be sure.
Well, I mean, that's the problem of like, it's stripped away our humanity, our ability to like even conversate. We don't know how to conversate. We're awkward. And this is like, actually, I'll add to that something else. Like, you guys all know my brother Bilal. I'm going to like call him out here. Like, we were driving to Canada and, you know, I'm driving the car and like, he's texting me like nonstop while we're driving to Canada. And so I call him. I'm like, Bilal, are you driving or is your wife driving? He's like, no, I'm driving. So like, this whole generation of like, we can't be off our phones even for 1 second. It's really, really scary.
I mean, subhanAllah, I would just also like sometimes, some of us are in these dynamics where we may have to give talks or whatever it would be. And I would always have to write notes on hand and people would laugh because I would pull out literally like pieces of paper or maybe some notes on a card, old school style. And now it's like everything's on the phone. Like, I would say if you talk to most imams and most sheikhs, I would imagine that most of their content or whatever their thoughts are probably scattered across their devices. It's kind of interesting to see that.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to add to that because, I've been in situations with other mashayikh on stage, and they're not checking their notes. They're like, they're looking on their phones, just like random stuff. And to me, that's really bad adab. Like if I'm on a stage for an hour and a half and you're speaking or someone else is speaking, I'm going to actually listen to what you have to say. Or, even better yet, I'm going to include the dhikr of Allah sitting in contemplation as I'm about to say something. And so I'm hopefully going to be speaking from my heart. But like, I'm telling you, this iPhone doom scrolling culture has permeated all facets of society. And it's a disease that, even Apple, what's his name? Steve Jobs, like, I don't think he let his kids use the iPhone, right?
Yeah, no, famously. Yeah, that's the famous notion of it.
Yeah. Well,
here we are.
Here we are on the iPhone. Speaking of which, on the iPhone, and something I saw on my iPhone, and subhanAllah, I think is big news for the whole ummah of Sayyidina Rasulullah alayhi salam. Actually, it's big news for all of humanity. And it's a big news, of course, for our beloved brothers and sisters in Syria, is the downfall of this tyrannical regime of Bashar al-Assad. And of course, before him, Hafez al-Assad. So I first want to just congratulate, first and foremost, the world. And I want to congratulate my Syrian brothers and sisters who've suffered so much pain, so much hardship over the years. Alhamdulillah, Allah gave you faraj. And I want to congratulate the Muslim ummah, bi'idhnillah, on the downfall of a tyrant. And inshallah, the opening of Palestine is next, bi'idhnillah, and all of our places that are oppressed. But Ghaidar, I want to start with you, Habibi. What did it feel like, your Syrian background and coming and seeing this reality?
SubhanAllah, Allahu Akbar, Wallah alhamd, Allahu Akbar, Wallah alhamd. This is, we're still, I was yesterday at a Syrian event in DC, and we're still processing like the 11 days through which, this beautiful fath from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala happened is just still in the mode of processing for us, because prior to that, we were, none of us, Syrians or otherwise, were thinking that this is going to happen. And subhanAllah, there's a beautiful hikmah from Hikam al-Ata'iyya, Hikam ibn Ata'illah Secondary, where he says, when there's a hibah from Allah along the lines, I forgot the actual literal, hikmah, in itself, but the ma'na is that whenever there is a gift from Allah, whenever there is a dunya event that happens as a gift from Allah, it happens quick, so that people of that community or that land do not think it's their tadbir. And this is exactly what happened. SubhanAllah, it's a true gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He just gave the idhn of this barbaric, criminal, regime to just come down. And alhamdulillah, it's a huge fath from Allah, and things on the ground were just happening so fast, so in a very blessed way as well, in terms of the believe it or not, the peacefulness of it. It's a very unique feeling. Like whenever the revolution fighters, are coming into, like, especially when they first came into the city of Halab, my own city, not a single, drop of blood was made, and there was a whole lot of other things that happened, with the people of the city coming out to welcome them. And one of the most beautiful signs of how it happened was that battalions from these, small pieces of the revolution armies were all like assigned to their own cities. Like people from Halab were coming back to their own houses and their own people. And when, the people, were hearing these folks coming into the city, they felt so much relief. They felt so much, joy and peace, alhamdulillah. Of course, on the outskirts of each city, there was a whole lot of fighting, or actually, well, compared to the city, there was a whole lot of fighting, but, in a very, very astonishing way, the Assad forces just left their arms. A lot of folks were forced into serving this, despotic military, and they just threw down their arms and left. A lot of them.
And just I want to just set up for everyone that's like listening. Like Ghaidar and I were at a gathering of the Remembrance of Allah at the Adams Center in Northern Virginia. That was on a Saturday night. And then afterwards, we took our kids to get something to eat. And you and I were just sitting at the table. And we were just talking. And I said, oh, Ghaidar, I heard that the forces are now on the outskirts of Damascus. And you're like, yeah, they're on the outskirts of Damascus. And then what, 10 minutes later, Ghaidar, 20 minutes later? You said they're in the center of Damascus.
Yeah, Allahu Akbar. And it was just it was very, very surreal, and it feels like a dream. Seriously, I don't know how to process it, honestly, but it's now starting to process. With everything that's happening, may Allah protect them. A lot of the folks on the ground are saying, the easy part. Of course, it was not easy, but the easy part is gone, and now is the very worrisome part. But by Allah's rahmah, inshallah, we learned, like, over 14 years, Syrian people have learned many, many, many lessons that they have paid for with their own blood. And I have huge faith in the Syrian community. I know that a lot of Syrians are nervous, and there's a lot of chatter online about what's to come and who's to conquer Syria and this and that. That's all in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I have a huge, faith, back to, the reason why I started my talk with the hikmah of Sayyidina ibn Ata'illah is the fact that our job as Muslims is to view, life's events, especially the big ones, in the lens of the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then all the strategic thinking, all of the other political, economical, and intellectual pontification, it comes through that lens. We are not like the other people from outside of the Ummah of Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. We are people who are orienting ourselves first to how we see this through the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then after that, we can just go ahead and act within those parameters. And
Arfan, what were your feelings when you heard the news?
I think it was jubilation on a profound sense. I do think that there is a bit of, maturity in the community these days. I think as a community gone through, from 2011. And I don't know if you remember this, Muhtasim, but we were traveling together, I believe, in Morocco, and we visited shuyukh who had moved to Morocco because, they were forced to. They had to flee Damascus. They had to flee parts of Syria. And then there was also people we were traveling with who were part of a kind of a Syrian, movement in exile. And I think it's just a challenge, for myself to really feel that this is something, that all of us as an ummah should be really supporting, at least within our thoughts and our prayers, if not more than that. And I think, as much as people have unfortunately succumbed to conspiracy theories, I think one of the biggest challenges with that is that our community, oftentimes because of the fragile state that we've been in a post-colonial construct, is really quick to diminish any success and simply throw away the idea of the qudra of Allah or la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi wal azim, and simply go to the easiest notion of, oh, well, this must be this, that, or the other, and there's no doubt there are obviously agendas afoot. You have 7 or 8 countries bombing Syria simultaneously right now in different regions. You have vying political interests. You have, a coalition of groups, which is HTS, but it's really a coalition that's for now in kind of the driver's seat. And you even had foreign governments this week meet to discuss the future of the country. So I think there's a lot to be kind of digested. But one thing that people should really understand is that looking at the hikam of Ibn Ata'illah is that one of the hikams is that those things that are brought in the beginning with Allah in mind, then they return to Allah like in the end. And so the intentionality behind this effort, the maturity, like as Ghaidar mentioned, the different lessons have been hard lessons to learn. And so inshallah, we, as we all want for our brothers and sisters, a sense of afiyah. But I do think that, I'm sure you guys are listening to what I'm listening to or hearing the kind of algorithms that are out there, but a lot of the talk of the end of days and, these types of things and the marhama and all these types of stuff. I'm not negating prophetic prophecy. I think that's something that we all should be understanding where our scriptural and our prophetic understanding comes from. But I think it's important to realize the moment we're in and not be so short-sighted or dismissive or lack the sense of cynicism that I think has unfortunately grabbed a lot of people. And I mean, and in general, I do see a lot of people coming together from different walks within the ummah to kind of celebrate this. At the same time, I wish that there was more of an understanding of the wider implications that that this could potentially have for the future of Islam in terms of its statecraft, but also in the future of the ummah in such a pivotal part of our. And I don't know anyone who's really understood the depth of the type of religiosity that comes out of Syria. And the Prophet ﷺ spoke about this in terms of the merits of Bilad al-Sham in different hadith. But I think part of it also just from a living tradition, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah has in many ways survived through many of the scholarship and the lines and the genealogies that are present in Syria. And I think
absolutely. It's a land of barakah. It's a land of nur. It's a land of khair. And look, I mean, we've all been watching those horrific scenes of people being pulled out of jail, like, frightened if a human being even comes close to them. That means that they've been trained to know that pain is on its way. Like you're about to suffer, and so you see people being pulled out of jail, women 40 plus years because of random issues. You see women going into jail and coming out with children. I mean, terrible, terrible things to such a beautiful, beautiful people like Ahl Barakah. And, look, let's, I'm totally okay with differing of opinions and having different thoughts and different, ideas, but like not with hubris. What I saw, unfortunately, from some sectors was like, oh, this is just a plot by the Americans and the Israelis, blah, 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 blah. Take that. Well, first of all, where's your humanity? Like, first, can you celebrate with the Syrian people who have been suffering? Can you just pause for 1 second? I'm not saying that there may not be truth to some of the aspects of what you're bringing up, but just pause for 1 second and feel a sign of relief that these incredible human beings who have been suffering for so long have now a moment to breathe. And that when I saw that missing in some sectors, I said, well, they could use a dose of rahmah over there. Inshallah, Allah gives it to them. But Syria, Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu anhu arda is buried there. The ulama are there. Sayyidina Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam, he told us that the angels spread their wings over Sham. It's an incredible, incredible area. And so I just wanted to start our conversation by, really congratulating our brothers and sisters from Syria, and to say, like, we feel your pain. We can never fully feel your pain, but we've seen the horrors.
And even when you, when you see, some of the folks who have like comments like, how can you celebrate this and that, Gaza? When you see the people of Gaza, truly, I don't know if you guys seen some of the videos coming out of Gaza, in the midst of their, misery, may Allah give them relief and rahmah, ya Rab. They are congratulating without any, pure joy, congratulating the people of Syria. And that's such a beautiful reflection of their Rabbani character, subhanAllah. And to your point, Arfan, a lot of the strategic the spiritual strategic, if I like, this is an odd duality, but a lot of it really comes from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. I mean, he ﷺ did not, even though that the empire of Faris was crumbling and was just ready for the taking, he ﷺ focused on sending the efforts of the Sahaba to the Byzantine Empire, to the Bilad al-Sham area. And that was like through Mu'tah, then Tabuk, then of course with Sayyidina Osama bin Zayd before he passed ﷺ. All of that really centralizes if you were to think of the Prophet as a leader, ﷺ, and I know a lot of us, when we talk about Sirah, we don't talk about the political and the strategic way that he ﷺ has raised his Sahaba to be. He always put that as a first destination. And it truly was, after they got in, the entire area left and right was open to them, after the conquering of Bilad al-Sham. So that to me is, I always, not because I'm from the greater Bilad al-Sham area, I'm, and for those who are listening, we are thinking of Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine. We're not thinking it's because it's an area where it had several civilizations come through it over almost 10,000 years. And the city of Aleppo, the city of Damascus are the oldest living, cities in any civilization in the world. And that is not just a one dynasty that comes after another, like in the Egyptian example or in the, Bilad Faris example. Those are several, from 7,000 to 9,000 years ago, all the way until now, several total different empires that occupied Bilad al-Sham. And the innate DNA or the inherent, memory of the DNA memory of the people is that they have all these, summaries of everything basically being translated into their being, into their culture. And I do have, inshallah, great faith in how things are turning out. I this is how we are, taught at the end of the day. We don't lose rahmah. We don't lose hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes is, despair is from kufr, basically. And all these folks who are paving the road right now to say, oh, this is the plot and so. There's check out every single political analysis. This was not expected by the Americans, nor the Russians, nor the East, nor the West, even though that everybody had their hand into it in a sense in terms of trying to do the tug of war. They could not predict that this will happen. That included the HTS folks who are leading the rest of the factions in the revolution. Everybody was thinking that they're gaining 50 miles east of Idlib into Halab just to relax the population from the bombing that's happening over the past 5 years on them. Every day, nobody talks about them.
I think but you have to also think about, if you're an individual there and you see not only the situation happening in Gaza, but within the last year, the reputation or the stature of Bashar al-Assad being rehabbed, it's like a rehab. He was being welcomed by Arab leaders. It seemingly feels like this effort that started in 2011, but even if you were to go back to the 1962 coup d'etat that became part of a wider Ba'athist or neo-Ba'athist agenda. And then I think it's interesting to see now, because, neo-Ba'athists, I don't think we get a lot of critique of the Ba'athist party. I don't know why, but, when we think about Iraq, for most of us, that's probably maybe from a generational perspective, our first introduction to the Ba'athist party. But their control with the Nasrites in Egypt, their situation, their ambitions throughout the Arab world and creating pan-Arabism, but through this kind of Marxist socialist lens. And yet today, the people on the far left are the first ones who are, citing all of these notions of that there's this conspiracy. Look at what's happening with Israel's incursion into the Golan Heights, yada, yada. And I understand those are all real concerns, but it is interesting to see so much, cynicism from that socialist left, but at the same time, them not understanding that the leadership and the rule that has been dominant within a very large part of the Muslim world has been this Ba'athist socialist far left. And so I think as a lot of young Muslims, particularly American, who are imbibing, leftist ideologies on college campuses, and we saw a lot of that during these, these protests, which a lot of us, most of us in the community supported the kind of right to protest, but the kind of language and the thought that was being presented was far left. And
yeah, of course. Like I went to where was it, in Hopkins? So yeah, I was in Hopkins University, and I went to one of the encampments.
Yeah,
and I was like, "What is going on here?" I mean, listen. I mean, and alhamdulillah that the idea as to why we were out there was good.
Yeah.
But when we're among the jama'ah who were running it, those are not my people.
There you go. Not my people. That's what I was saying.
Those are not my people. And we have to be very clear here as to who we are with our Muslim moral identity. Yes, we may agree in this particular circle about that's a genocide and we're all going to stand up for it, but we're not standing on the same platforms, because once that's over, we have a message to take to all those people that we're in the encampments with.
Yeah.
We got to tell them about the Tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jalla.
And I know, and I think, a lot of MSAs were involved. There are a lot of prayer sessions and there's a lot of things happening. And I'm not, saying, I'm not dismissing it with a wide brush, but I do think it's important to really, if you're a Muslim young person and you're on a college campus and you're imbibing Muslim identity, and you're employing a Muslim identity politics as part of your, your discourse, what are you actually coming from? Do you understand the long, horrific history of socialist ideas within the Muslim context and how many millions of people have been killed? Where has socialism ever equated to the freedom of our people? Whether it was wrapped up in a pan-Arab, dynamic, or whether it was sold to us through different, means, it's an important understanding to see where the failings happen. And I understand the far left will have a critique and say, well, the neo-Baathists went this way, they became militarized, or whatever their critique was originally, away from the thoughts of Aflaq or from Bitar, the kind of ideological founders. But still, important things to be thought about, in terms of, as Muslims, to really seize an opportunity here to theologically and intellectually engage with these ideas so that those pernicious thoughts don't come back into the fold.
I mean, the biggest indicator is what you see, like those folks who are following the news, let's say, of Syria. They were fine with a Ba'athist regime, killing people for past 14 years. They were fine with chemical weapons by them being thrown. They were fine by even like resistant Israel, quote unquote, that's like, the story that's being told, not a single bullet was fired by the Assad regime against Israel. It's the most peaceful front that Israel, and they're called the resistance axis, along with Iran and Hezbollah. So this is such a sham, and pun intended. And I wanted just to say, all these 14 years, none of these guys were saying anything. And then the second, these quote unquote bearded people took over Damascus, now every single يحسبون كل صيحة عليهم, there's every single suspicious pontification of like, ooh, now these guys were the ones who were like paving the way for Israel. I mean, of course Israel is going to get in, because that's what Israel is. That's its own nature. And nobody's talking about how barbaric that approach is. Like there was a treaty, and they go into a very weak country, and nobody bats an eye. Nobody says anything. Imagine this encroachment on a whole new land, like a country invading a country. Not only that, they start now paving the way for settlements. Like, what are you guys doing? Like, they're like right away, mubasharatan, And then on top of that, hundreds of sites of around Damascus and the entire between Quneitra and Damascus are being bombed. All these intelligence sites, all these military weapon repositories, all these places were bombed under the guise that those are the Assad regime weaponries. And this is crazy. This is the the land and the property of, even if it was weapons, this is the Syrian people's weapons. This is what the Assad regime has been robbing his people for the past 5 decades. So just the fact that they're overlooking all of this and just making this argument, it's such a feeble argument. And even if you look at I don't know how we got into the leftist Marxist history of this.
Before I get into that, because you brought up Israel, I just pulled up an article here. I'm gonna CBS News: Israel strikes destroy Syria's weapons of war as ousted Assad laments country's fall into hands of terrorism. I don't know if you guys saw this. It's a CBS article.
Weapons of war. These are weapons of defense of a country. In any other country, this will be like a major war with Israel.
Yeah. A CBS News team drove through a Syrian military airbase on the outskirts of the capital city, Damascus, Monday, and the devastation caused by Israeli airstrikes was abundantly clear. Israel has said it is determined to destroy weapons and other military hardware that ousted dictator Bashar al-Assad and his father spent half of a century accumulating before it can fall into the hands of extremists. The Israeli military has pounded Syrian military infrastructures relentlessly since Assad fled to Russia earlier this month, forced out by a shock rebel offensive after a decade of civil war that had, until about 2 weeks ago, largely ground to an apparent stalemate. The article goes on. The damage inflicted on Assad's old war machine has been staggering. Okay. One strike overnight in the coastal city of Tartus, for instance, was so massive that the Syrian Observatory of Human Rights Monitoring Group quoted a scientist in Turkey as saying it had registered on the Richter scale as equivalent of a Category 3 earthquake.
Yeah, they destroyed the Tartus, seaport. They destroyed a major, like one of two major seaports of a country. They just literally, trading and otherwise, the whole thing is just becoming, as if, and the impunity of how they are doing this is just staggering. Really, true, طواغيت, honestly, what's happening now in the backdrop of Syria, is just very scary, subhanallah. But then at the same time, speaking ummah-wise, this, if you talk about causation and talk about who started what, what happened in Gaza basically led to the fall of the Assad regime. If you look at this, is it's a series of events that took place in Bilad al-Sham that took the Assad regime down, pushed the Iranian regime out, effectively broke the axis of resistance, quote unquote, that killed so many innocent people, to the unliking of so many who are anti-imperialist, have killed many folds more than Israel has killed in its entire history. We're talking about 600,000 to 800,000 people who the Assad regime killed of his own people. We're talking about 60 to 65% of the cities and the towns of Syria being bombed to Berlin style, if you look at all these, drone footage of the city of Homs, Hama, Eastern Aleppo, and many other cities, they're level to the ground. Half of the population of Syria being driven out into the entire world. Subhanallah. And it's you're talking about, 13 million people, 12 million people? Done over 14 years, everybody watching. So just to reflect over this entire, magnitude of the, we're not playing, Olympics of who suffered what, we are all one people, one ummah. But, what happened in Gaza, subhanAllah, was the catalyst. It just ended this craze. And inshallah, it will be an opening. Everybody just read your history well. Read your history. Read your history how Quds, got liberated, Read your history well, and you will know that it starts with Halab and Hama and Homs and Sham. And inshallah, it will go on for more.
Yeah, I mean, look, to many of us, we become desensitized about what's happening in the news and what's happening to people. And you're talking about 11 years in, or actually, centuries in.
Almost 14, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so people forget about how brutal Assad and his dad and the litany of characters were. I mean, articles are out there. I'll just read some of them to you here. Tortures, executions, chemical attacks on civilians, ethnic cleansing, bombing of residential areas, using famine as a weapon of war. The litany of war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by Bashar al-Assad's regime appear to be endless. After decades of impunity, international investigators are now hoping to obtain direct access to evidence documenting 50 years of abuses. More than 300,000 civilians since 2011 have lost their lives, and at least 100,000 Syrians have been forcibly disappeared. I mean, Ghaidar, you know better than us, and probably you do too, Arfan. Like, we have dear Syrian friends and family members who they don't even know where their brothers are, their sisters, their parents.
No.
Like, no idea.
So only from the detained, which is like, just, I'm sure the upcoming days are going to just show the horror, not of the Syrian regime, of the horror of the international community just watching, just letting things happen. Almost close to Mu'tasim, 200,000 people went into Assad regime jails. Do you know how many they got out? Less than 10%. The rest are, they discovered, and forgive me, but you guys are probably already know, like, human crushing machines. They crush their bones and then they drain them, and then they process them chemically, so they don't even bury them. In major, like in the Saydnaya prison, they have a pit called the acid pit. They just throw, and you got people who are giving their video testimonies on it. So in the Saydnaya prison, they got in like between 3,000 to 7,000 people, and on the records that were burnt, and people who were like only from the Syrian Humanity Society. I forgot what their name is. There's at least 50,000 people in just one prison. They only got 3,000 to 7,000 people out.
But to kind of put this in like wider context, I think Muslims also, because of the dynamics in Gaza, we're hearing big loss of life numbers. In 1982, I believe it was, in the situation in Hama, where many of us have maybe scholarly traditions that come from those scholars from Hama, but 40,000 people were massacred. Civilians were killed during that, and that was the time of Assad. Prior to that, when he came into power in the 70s, you had maybe this kind of like push for this socialist utopia where you had 85% of the agricultural lands were distributed to landless peasants. You had this discussions about class struggle, all these types of socialist these ideas. And now when you see what's coming in terms of imagery of what the palace was like, these underground fortresses, these types of the lifestyles that they were living, all of those, supposed socialist ideals are out the window. And that is the reality, unfortunately, of this dunya. It's hubba riyasa, this love for leadership is at the root of every evil. That's something that it's mentioned in the Murshid Ma'in, that it's the love of this leadership, the love of this dunya that results in all of this kind of obfuscation. And so, I honestly just feel like we as a ummah, we have wide eyes, that we have discernment, that we have basira, that we're looking at this with true objectivity and with the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we don't get caught up in any other type of ism away from the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that we hope the best for, an accountable governance to be there,
And even if it doesn't happen right away, like you're talking about a nation that's wrought with like 4 or 5 decades of extreme suppression. Civil societies need time to come back up. Democracy.
Look at Libya, Habibi. Look, my in-laws in Libya. I mean, look, their whole life was dealing with the massacres and the tortures and the rapes of Gaddafi and his crazy nature of everything he's doing. You ask any Libyan, they're happier with what's going on right now than during that time. So, it takes time to rebuild, especially when all of the forces around you are against you. I mean, that's just the reality that we're all
I
seeing.
want to say one thing. I mean, like aside from like all the again political pontification of what's going to happen, just look at there's an ayah from Allah. Not only the speed of the fall of the Assad regime. Look at all these people. Like anybody who would think that the Assad regime has fallen, you would think that there will be bloodbaths in every single city with all these revolution fighters coming and seeking revenge. But it did not happen. The fact that it did not happen over now 10 days since the fall, well, it's almost a week now, falling of Damascus, and way more than that for Halab, Hama, and Hamas. You would think like, subhanAllah, that's an ayah from Allah, that there's no revenge, that there's no, like, even Syrians, including myself, we were thinking like, if the Assad regime falls, over the years, we're thinking like there's going to be another wave of bloodbath. All the Alawites are going to be, chased. All like a whole wave of those folks who are. The fact that it's peaceful, relatively peaceful, and relatively is like, even if I say yes, just yesterday they recorded one incident of a tribe in Dar'a that were fighting the revolution. They killed like 3 or 4 people because they got one of the killers from their tribe. He used to be like an Assad militant, and he basically led a battalion, and they got him, and he was hiding. And when they got him, tried to extract him from the city, his own tribe, again, tribalism is very, very heavily, followed in most of the suburban and rural life in Syria. They just chased after them, and they killed all these 3-4 guys who are from, the Syrian Free Army. And this was the only incident that happened over the past 9 days. And that's just a very, very, subhanAllah, just to think of it. So the reason why I'm saying this is I have huge hopes, inshallah, for our entire ummah. I know that everybody around in the Arab world and maybe the Muslim world is looking of how can we learn from this? How can we move? Wallahi, I was when I stood up, when I knew that this was when this was happening, aside from my emotional state, wallahi, I looked into a dear aunt of mine at that time, and I said, wallahi, this is one step closer to Gaza, bi'idhnillah. Wallahi, this is one step closer to our brothers and sisters in Egypt, to our brothers and sisters in Sudan, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. And we will never forget. We will never forget. Yes, we stand in joy, but we will never forget that ummah-centric, like the people who were raising the flags of Palestine and other countries in some of these rural towns in Syria. I'm like, what is this huge compass of understanding? That you wouldn't think that it will come from an oppressed society. And they have just this wider scope of understanding. And then you would come to Muslims living in the West, and they're, trapped in their own, even people of knowledge. I've seen some posts from imams. They're honestly shameful. And they are teaching in renowned institutions. And they've been doing this this is not just a blurb. This is happening over years and years. They never let go of that hollow, idea of usul, of like following a certain fiqh, you've seen many signs, you've seen many stories on the ground. It's time to rethink what you're trying to, give nasiha to the ummah.
Yeah, I don't think you mean that there's a hollow idea in following fiqh or usul. I don't think that's what you're saying there.
I'm saying their own understanding. The usul is what the usul of what Thank you for bringing that. I don't mean the usul is hollow. Their understanding. They got 2-3 ideas that were historically taken from a certain line of thinking that's in the camp of the regimes, or in the camp of the hakim, and they just stuck with it despite the rivers of blood that happened. They stuck with it. And major ulama from the same madhahib, may Allah bless them, from these countries, they explained, that we need to depart away from these ideas, and because they are killing us, they are suffocating us in our own religiosity, in our own understanding. This is what I mean by their understanding is hollow. Yani ra'i fasid. Ra'i fasid is like, is an opinion that's based on certain things that may or may not have been true in the past, but then later on, the past 20 years have shown that they are very, very damaging.
Yeah, that's a lot of what here. Just moving on, we want to we have some time to talk about, I don't know, you guys probably saw the news today, very sad news coming out of Gaza of Khaled Nabhan becoming a shaheed. Sad news, of course, not in him becoming a shaheed. Sad news, we rejoice over him returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in such a beautiful, beautiful state. But sad news in that, he was the rose of Gaza. A man who we all know him as a ruh. His grandchildren, Reem, had been taken by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through this terrible, terrible genocide that we're seeing of the Israelis. And he just filled the whole world with rahmah and mercy when he was speaking about his granddaughter. And then he just became a man who went around Gaza taking care of people. Like he saw old women, helping them walk, young children who lost arms or legs, putting smiles to their faces, cooking for people, feeding cats. Have you guys seen these videos of him feeding cats? Yeah, he was probably starving. He was hungry. But instead, he's feeding cats. Arfan, have you seen some of these videos?
Yeah, mashallah. It's just heartbreaking to, not only hear the news, but to see someone who had suffered such a huge loss and then was able to turn that loss into such a opportunity to uplift others. Many of us, obviously, watching this through different lenses or different, we're touched by that. And I think it's it's such an amazing example to live a life that way and have a legacy that way.
Yeah, subhanAllah. And so for me, it was very bittersweet. It's so sweet in that he's with Allah. He's with Al-Habib, salawatu rabbi wa salamu alayhi wa ala ali. This is a man, he walked in this world, but he was really walking in the akhirah. Like he knew where he was going. So it's sweet in that regard. It's bitter in the sense that, this constant Israeli onslaught there's no sense of rahmah, like nothing. None. No concept whatsoever. And it's just like, whenever you think they hit a low, they show you, oh, no, we can actually go lower than this. Oh, we have to go lower than this. We have to prove to you how low we can go. But that's not our way, Khaydar, it's not the way that we act. It's not the way that our teachers taught us. It's not the way that the ulama Rabbaniyun act, and it's not the way of the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.
And so he was a man of ilm too. He was a man of ilm.
Yeah. I always looked at him, guys. I looked at him as like a manifestation of the light of our Prophet alayhi sallam during our time. Like the Prophet alayhi sallam, you can imagine he's like all nurani, and he's shining lights. And Ruh Khaled Nabhan, some of that light was being shined on him. Not all of it, impossible. And so we were just benefiting from that. So, I don't know, subhanAllah, it was a sad day, definitely a sad day, a heavy day. I woke up to that news, as soon as I woke up, and we were getting the kids ready for school. And my wife, she says to me, "Did you hear the news?" I said, "What news?" And then she told me, Ruh returned to Allah's rahmah. I said, "Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un." Like I felt like I lost a friend. A teacher. I lost a teacher. I lost a teacher.
May Allah accept him. May Allah accept him, Ya Rabbi.
Ameen, Ya Rabbi, Ameen. But if we're actually moving from what's happening on the world stage to what's happening on the local stage, we're coming towards the end of the year. And what are we doing? There's a few conferences going on. I think there's the RIS conference that's happening in Canada. But this year I'm not going to RIS. Instead, I'm going to the ICNA East Zone conference. We're going to be driving to Atlanta, Georgia. Arfan, are you joining? You coming with us? What are you doing?
No, I'm doing a caregiving trip, so I will be in California this time.
Oh, mashallah.
So, inshallah. But yeah, I was in spirit. I mean, it seems like, I got to admit, ICNA has, and I don't often praise other organizations, but just to say that, like, I went to the conference in Baltimore that they did over the summer, and I was just, I was thoroughly impressed with the generational shift, with the way they're able to inculcate young people. There's a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, let's put it that way, with a lot of high school, college kids there. The community has grown and it's matured a lot. SubhanAllah. I think they've been able to kind of scale up with the community, and not everyone has.
They have good roots though, right? Like, remember YM? So they have great roots, mashallah. They're very impressive, and a lot of good hearts, a lot of very huge intent on making a difference, mashallah.
I would like to see ICNA invite someone like Sheikh Yahya Rodis. I would like to see ICNA invite someone like Sheikh Hassan Al-Ashhab. Like, listen, I love ICNA. ICNA, if you're any ICNA people listening out there, Assalamu alaikum, jazakumullah anna kul khair. Because in May, whenever I go down to Baltimore, it's packed with Muslims, and I love it.
Yeah, mashallah.
It's a beautiful thing to see. But I do want to give a message to my beloved ICNA brothers and sisters, jazakumullah khair. I think you can add another layer that you haven't been adding for quite some time, and I think that's conscious. And I think you need to start to bring in some individuals such as Sheikh Yahya Rodis, some individuals like Sheikh Hassan Al-Ashhab. These are two beautiful, beautiful souls. I think it'd be very, very nice to have them at your conference. Now that being said, we've got the Zawiyah-Mobile. Ghaidar, you want to tell everyone what the Zawiyah-Mobile is?
Oh, yes. So basically, half of your deen, everybody, is through sahba. Basically, tell me who your friend is, I'll tell you who you are. So we are trying to, of course, a bunch of young and not so young dads. We're trying to. I'm
not young anymore, Ghaidar. I did an MMA session the other day, and I was like, yeah, I think I'm done.
Yeah. So, a lot, like, seriously, a lot of what we're doing is really stemming from trying to, huddle together really in suhbah, in this dunya, until inshallah we meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in khair wa afiyah bi'idhnillah, under the banner of Sayyidina Nabi alayhi salatu wassalam. But that needs work, and and إنما يأكل الذئب من الغنم القاصية, like the wolf would take the stray sheep. So we need to come together, and it stemmed from our group gatherings with our families, our wives and children, coming together in dhikr, coming together in gatherings of remembrance every Thursday, and then trying to do these local trips here and there. But then all of a sudden, the guys were saying, you know what? We want to just go out on our own sometimes, like a guy gathering. So we have this van that fits about 14 guys, and alhamdulillah, last year somebody named it the Zawiyah-Mobile and just got stuck to it. And now we have, we went to a risk convention last year, I believe. Our dear teacher and guide, Sidna Sheikh Mukhtar Maghrawi, was there. So we went there. This year, alhamdulillah, he is being invited to the ICNA convention in Atlanta. And guess what? We'd like to hit some, coffee spots on the way, maybe, and just talk some good talk, and people hear some banter, and we get there. We meet some good people from that beautiful state and beyond, and we come back.
Yeah, it's beautiful. You just get in the van, you start to do the dhikr of Allah together, you talk to each other, you argue with each other, you get to know each other. Last year we had to make wudu in some freezing cold rest stop. Remember that, Ghaidar? Somewhere in like Buffalo or wherever we were.
And we got access to a masjid through the security camera.
Yeah, the security camera. We went to pray, Arfa. We were at some like random town in this like tiny, like, it was like this old village. It's like a New York village.
Yeah.
And we found it like, oh, there's a masjid there. So we go to the masjid. There's like 15 of us, and we're like trying to open the door. And then all of a sudden, like the door is speaking to us. Like, who's there? We're like, oh my God. It's like the ring camera. We're like, hey, we all have our kufis on and our shawls. Like, we want to pray.
Where were you? Like, where were you again? Were you like, because
I don't even know. We don't even know.
Some town
driving.
on the border of Pennsylvania and New
Yeah,
York.
Pennsylvania, New York, somewhere, and that's
A
part of the
holler,
beauty.
a holler. I think that's what you call it, a holler or something like that.
Holler, yeah, like
Yeah.
so, like this tradition, and this is something like, listen, like it is so powerful. If you really want to get to know someone, you have to travel with them. It's so true. And like we like to see each other in like pristine events, like you know, you want to see me where my thobe is like ironed perfectly and my beard is like trimmed perfectly. No, I want to
When?
see
When does
you.
that happen, bro? When?
Have you been talking? You've been talking to Rehan. Is Rehan in this room?
I think he's around here somewhere.
Rehan, he just haunts me everywhere I go. That guy. Atahallahu ala Rehan. No, but like, anyhow, what I was saying, Arfan, was like, no, we want to see each other in like raw brotherly form, like just love, mahabba together, and if you look at most relationships that guys have, it's either just like at a dinner at a masjid, at a dinner at each other's house, or you go to some restaurant. Like, no, man, like be in like awkward positions together, like, and travel. And so it's a beautiful tradition. So what we're doing is we're going to drive from Maryland. We're going to drive to Atlanta, Georgia, inshallah. And we're going to meet the Atlanta community. And we're going with the intention to be in the suhbah of each other and suhbah of Sheikh Mukhtar. And we're looking forward to meeting our other brothers that are there in Atlanta. And then we drive back. And it's an experience that bonds hearts. And we do trips like that even overseas. And I think this is something lost. So like, bond people, like, back to what you were saying, Arfan, about the iPhone, man, like the doom scrolling, like we can't even talk to each other. Like if I come over your house, I don't even want to talk to you. I want to look at my phone. I got to ban that.
Yeah. I mean, the other reality is like, because we've known each other for decades at this point, I think traveling abroad, we got to see other sides of things. I think some of those bonds are really cemented through those experiences. I know inshallah, we'll be able to do another road trip to Taysir Seminary that we're planning.
Yeah, we have to listen, guys. Sheikh Hassan called. He said, like, enough, Mu'tasim.
Yeah,
he's like, I've been visiting Maryland for the past 12 years, and you guys haven't come down to Tennessee once. I was like, Sheikh Hassan, you are absolutely right. We are bad brothers. We are coming.
When I saw that video from Sammy, I was like, is he here? Or because like he's going to make us go there. So I was like, we have to. That's another trip. But like, yeah, the idea of just bonding together and being together. So like these conferences, for anyone that's go to the conferences, take your families to the conferences. They're all great. I mean, they're all a good experience, whether you're going to go to RIS, which alhamdulillah is a nice experience. It's packed. It's a good place to go. Whether you're going to go to, ICNA, this is the East Zone Conference, not the main conference. So that's where we'll be headed. And then, then we're just bunkering in. We've got the U.S. holiday season is upon us. I made the mistake of going to Target the other day, and like I just needed to get like milk. And I was fighting, not fighting, I don't fight with anyone, but like the amount of cars in the parking lot was crazy. It is nuts. I mean, I do think, and I know I definitely want to give your take on this because, we talked a little bit off-site about this, but, there's this phenomena. I know that it's been going on for years, and I definitely saw it overseas, which I was shocked to see in Egypt, for example, where Christmas is just this like massive consumer celebration. You see these celebrities. I mean, these are Muslim celebrities.
Yeah.
Or influencers, whatever you want to call them. Literally, I'm just gonna be honest. As an American, it's weird. You're a fob, and you're sitting in like wherever you are, and you're wearing like snowman or Santa Claus, like like night dress or whatever. You're wearing these sweaters, and I know there's some brothers had good intentions of making like the Muslim Christmas song and the sheets and all. I'm not gonna I'll go all out against that, but it is interesting to see this dynamic in the community where you have Muslims. And I've seen it with generational, like people of like, yes, there's the original fobs who come here and they just want to acclimate. Maybe they live in a community that's not a lot of Muslims. And so they put the lights up and they don't really celebrate per se, but they do these types of things. But then there's like now people who are Muslim, like, observant Muslims who put Christmas trees. And it's kind of shocking. And then people just don't think there's a big deal. I know a few years ago, maybe our sister that we all know, Sister Shazia Ahmed, she wrote an article about this in like Muslim Matters. And it just came to light more recently for me, just talking to some people that this is still happening, that people are not thinking it's a big deal. And it's like, I don't know what it would be to understand this from an Islamic perspective, but that in many ways, many of the things that we do as Muslims, whether it's growing our beard, whether it's taking the suhoor meal, or whether it's like, for example, for men who wear the henna, they're all based upon traditions where the Prophet is trying to distinguish us from other religious communities. It's not in any way to denigrate those communities, but it's to distinguish the Muslim community, right? To separate a little bit. And the Prophet ﷺ told us that we have our celebration in the well-known hadith that's mentioned in Bukhari, that we have our celebration and this is our day. And so it's kind of sad to see that Muslims falling into this. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He's appointed a law and a way for every community, and our law and way is based on the practice of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So why would we then, take on Christian celebrations and and understanding that many of these things have become secularized, whether it's Halloween, Christmas, or whatever. But it's just an interesting thing to see this being permeated through this monoculture throughout the Muslim world. It's one thing.
Arfan, I've come to realize the more that someone attempts to pursue the love of the divine and the ma'rifah and the experiential knowledge of Allah and His Messenger, والسلام, the more they're going to have izzah and honor and the beauty of Islam. The more that we make our religion an experiential reality in our lives, the more we're going to fall in love with everything that the Prophet ﷺ handed to us, and the more we start to realize its greatness, its superiority, and its difference from everything else. And so I won't feel the need to put a Christmas tree in my home once I have that experiential pursuit of Allah and His Messenger, ﷺ. And so really, I think, we can address it from so many different ways, halal, haram, but I would just say to everyone out there that's doing that, what you have is so much more beautiful. What you can experience is so much more incredible. You just need to start that journey. And once you do that, you'll come to realize why you want to look and act in a particular way and why we don't want to look and act in a particular way. And I think the more that reality is disjointed from our lives, the more we become susceptible to wanting to partake in Halloween, wanting to put a Christmas tree in my house, wanting to put the lights up, or whatever it may be. And so I see it as like an opportunity for everyone. Like, hey, pursue the divine, subhana, from the immense spiritual tradition that was given to us from our Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi, and you won't really be interested in putting up some shirky Christmas tree in your home, because you'll realize in your heart, not necessarily forget your mind for 1 second, you'll realize in your heart how ugly that is. But until we have that experience or that reality within us, we can't necessarily see clearly. And the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam, one of the most beautiful du'as, ad'iyah he would make to Allah is, "Oh Allah, show us truth as truth, and give us the strength to embrace it. And oh Allah, show me falsehood as falsehood, and give me the strength to refrain from it." So there may be times, whether it's putting a Christmas tree in my house or getting my kids some gifts, that we know in the parameters of the beauty of what we have, that's not what we practice, but there may be something inside me that wants to lean into it and do it. But I have to ask Allah for the strength to actually keep me away from it. And so, that's what I would see. Alhamdulillah, I mean, the community that I'm connected with, by Allah's rahmah, I haven't seen much of that, though I do know what you're talking about. I've seen it in the UAE. I've seen it, here and there with a few families. And I would just say to those individuals, hey, what you have is so much more beautiful. I'm sorry. I apologize to you if you've ever had a teacher, a Sunday school teacher, that didn't teach you the beauty of Islam. I apologize to you. I'm sincerely apologizing to you if maybe your parents didn't instill in you the beauty of the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam, because maybe they didn't fully recognize it and see it. And so it wasn't a concept taught at home. And so we were searching for it somewhere else. Really, I'm sorry. But if you come back to this, there's nothing like Sayyidina Nabi sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. Wow, guys, like we're like at an hour now. I think, like, I know we're recording this a little bit late. I feel like it's past my bedtime, but we just wanted to connect. You're laughing at me because I'm old, Arfan.
No, I get up early. I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm on coffee right now.
What's our age difference, you and I? Do you recall? We don't have to say how old we are.
It's only 2, but I feel like it should be bigger. It should be bigger. I'm just being honest. But didn't you think it was bigger? I thought it was bigger. I'm sure the first time we realized that we're only 2 years apart, I was like, huh. No, I'm what?
Are you praising me or insulting me? Are you praising yourself?
It's however you want to take it. However you want to take it. But I would tell you.
I don't judge. You can judge. Until hakim bainana.
I can't judge anymore. All I'm thinking about is like some Christmas songs now.
Oh God.
The worst is when someone comes to you and it's like, someone's at work. I mean, I don't know what they thought I was, but they thought, oh, like this is Milad Majid, and I was like, what?
Oh my God,
where'd they get that from, bro? Like, I have an Egyptian Muslim. friend. I was like, yo, no.
That's a lot. I mean, you gotta give it to them. They have Mariah, but that's it.
But I'm not even gonna touch that. But the reality of the situation is that I think, as Mutassim just said, the Prophet said, those who imitated people are of them. And why would you want to imitate anyone but the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And if you really understood the depth of that spiritual bond that you could have, that life you could lead, the blessing it brings upon your heart, that tranquility that Islam can bring to you if you truly practice it. And with that, like I said, I mean, there's a lot of challenges within the community or a mosque or a Sunday school that you may have been taught in, but the reality is just connecting to the spirit of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam can have such a transformative experience that you would never understand why you would want to do something else. More importantly, it doesn't come from a place of confidence. So if you're all about being confident, and I think most people in the modern world want to at least act like they are, then why wouldn't you just be confident with what you have and who you are and who you truly are? And why would you imitate or, ape a culture that has nothing to do with your culture necessarily? And I say this as an American, as a proud American. I know many Americans who don't celebrate, especially Christmas during this kind of consumerist way. And, if they can do it, then why are you, going out of your way to do something that's not natural to your own cultural dynamic?
And perhaps because, our Muslim identity is becoming a card, like a lot of the Muslims are using it like, oh, I do this and I do that. It's like different suits, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever Muslim is saying is a true Muslim identity. It fills you up and satiates you and makes you look down in not in an arrogant way, but in a very rahma way. Like, I don't need this. I have very little time in this dunya, and I'm interested in basically spending it with the things that will make me, inshallah, come closer to Allah. So yeah, it becomes different. And I get it when you said something about Sunday schools. It just hit home really, really hard, Mu'tasim, because a lot of what we teach our children is being taught in a very superficial way, and it becomes almost like a repellent, in a way, because it's devoid of its Muhammadan, haqiqa, Muhammadan reality, in like how things are being lived first, and how children really learn from their surroundings, from how you are, living your life. And unfortunately, Christmas or anything else becomes like another add-on just to be able to get them busy and get yourself busy with another thing. Just like you're watching a movie, just like you're doing something else, you're going on a vacation. Things are just added on to you like another identity or another, thing to do. And unfortunately, they just keep us. They don't make us satiated, and they don't make us fulfilled, and we keep forgetting about the main show. So may Allah give us Ya Rab Futuh al-Arifin,
Ameen Ya Rabbi.
By the way, this is connected to our other topics, just as we close. this is connected. Like when we see the people of Gaza, when we see the people of Syria, when we see like how they're turning their lives around, how people are, you know, not forgetting even after like a year and a half almost of bombing, how they're just still keeping on, you know, that makes us, like, for those who have a little bit of two cents of iman, they'd be like, La ilaha illallah. Like I gotta shake off a lot of this stuff on my shoulders so that I can just emulate even 10% of what they're doing. You know, and I do have faith, alhamdulillah, in the fact that our general well-being has been, in a sense, spiritually better ever since, you know, these, you know, terrible events happen, of course, but inshallah, inna ma'al usri yusra, inshallah ta'ala.
Inshallah.
Barakallah feekum, hababi. Barakallah feek. Jazakumullah khair, everyone, for being with us here. And inshallah, we will catch you all soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.